Thanks to Storyblocks for sponsoring a portion of this video. So have you noticed how the content that we watch is getting shorter and shorter? I mean like really short, just nonstop, 30-second, one after the next, just perfectly tailored videos to exactly what we think, what we want to see, and who we are as a person. And it's also perfectly just encapsulated by our TikTok, our Instagram, our YouTube feeds. And these algorithms on these platforms, they know you better than most of your friends. They probably know you better than some of your family members. And so what happens in this case when you have something that is so intelligent, AI, that knows your brain so well, and its number one goal is to keep you on the platform for as long as possible? It's just something that I've been thinking about for a while, and not necessarily saying that's bad, but I want to kind of lay out the case for something known as a dopamine detox, and I gave it a try, and I want to share my experience with that. So first of all, I don't want to sound like a doom and gloom person. Although depression rates are a lot higher than they ever have been, I like to think that society has been moving in the right direction for the most part. I mean, fewer people around the world are starving, at least compared to 50 years ago. We've had some extraordinary medical advancements in the past just 10 or 20 years, and people have been living longer than ever for the most part. I mean, some places like the US, we've had a little bit of some slippage there, but for the most part, people are living longer, and I think society is going in a pretty good direction, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to stop and say, is this the right direction going forward? And so today I really want to focus the discussion on dopamine and how it affects our brains and some other mental health related issues that I kind of see arising within our society. And a massive quick disclaimer here, I'm obviously not a doctor. I mean, look at me. I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a therapist or anything else even remotely close to that. So I'm just a random guy on the internet that you're watching right now. So please take everything that I say with a grain of salt. This is not some type of prescription for you. It's just some of my personal experiences. Now, because of this accessibility to social media and the insane intelligence of these algorithms in the world today, I found it really increasingly difficult to be productive during my day, to be able to sit down and do nothing or reflect on my thoughts or where I was in the world or what I was doing with my life, because it kind of feels like everywhere I go now, there's always something that's trying to grab my attention and just hold it for as long as possible. And I think a lot of it was because of these hits of dopamine that were just so accessible, and I really had no discipline with it. So I want to share my experience with that. So over the past year or so, I've heard a number of people talking about this thing called dopamine detox. And I think when I saw a video about this, I watched a video last year, and I kind of wrote it off as like this ludicrous tactic that felt pretty extreme. But when I stopped and I stopped looking at the term so literally, and I realized that if you kind of just broaden the scope of this, of a dopamine detox in a much broader sense, everything started to make a lot more sense and actually a lot more practical and possible. Now, we do need to understand what dopamine is. It's basically a type of neurotransmitter in the brain that's naturally produced by the body as sort of a chemical messenger, and it affects many different behavioral and physical functions. So it's sort of like this feel-good sensation that you feel after experiencing something pleasurable, like let's say eating chocolate cake, even though you're probably going to regret it later, or maybe playing video games for hours instead of studying for a really big exam. What's driving a lot of these decisions that, in the long term, we didn't really, we know it's a bad decision, but we end up doing it anyway. And in a lot of cases, it's driven by dopamine. And so when you can kind of realize this, that, dopamine can kind of drive some of these short-term gratification things, then it can really help us a lot when we realize that if we can kind of stray away from this in a way and get some type of discipline, it can really help us. Now, it's important to note that the term dopamine detox, it's scientifically impossible to accomplish this. We'll get into that later in the video, but it's something very important to note, that you can't just rid of dopamine in your brain. In a lot of cases, dopamine's really good. It's just part of how humans function, but I think sometimes it can get the best of us and we make these short-term gratification decisions rather than prioritizing long-term. Now, the goal here for me was to really do that, to be able to focus on those long-term gratifications rather than short-term. And so there's 6 compulsive behaviors that this concept kind of targets. One of them is things like emotional eating, or maybe excessive internet usage, gaming, gambling, shopping, things like thrill and novelty seeking, or recreational drugs, or just using your phone so much you're almost addicted to it. And before we dive into these 6 different categories and discuss the results from my mini dopamine detox experience, I want to mention the sponsor for today's video, Storyblocks. Now, one of the biggest problems that I face as a creator is finding enough footage and audio and other elements to put into my video. And so Storyblocks really helps me with this. So they offer a wide array of different types of footage, like 4K footage, After Effects, Premiere Pro templates, music, images, sound effects, and so much more that gives you everything that you need to bring your stories to life. And of course, all of these assets are royalty free, so you can use your downloaded content anywhere for commercial or for personal use. And their unlimited all access plan gives you unlimited downloads to over 1 million assets in their library, so you can try out multiple options quickly. You can find the perfect fit so you can create more and spend less without sacrificing quality. And I think the biggest benefit to using Storyblocks for myself, and you can probably tell I use a lot of their music in the backgrounds, and I pull a lot of stock footage from them for even this video here today. And one of the biggest benefits to it is that it saves me so much time, which then in effect ends up saving me so much money. For example, if I wanted to go out and get this footage of a mountain, well, this is going to take me a lot of time. I'm going to have to drive to a mountain, find a mountain, and then try to get the perfect shot. It's going to take me hours to try to do this. So instead, I just use Storyblocks, and I can do this in 15 seconds. I can download it from their platform, and it saves me so much time and so much energy, and it just makes my life a lot easier. So thanks to Storyblocks for sponsoring this video. I really do appreciate it. I love them. Go ahead, check out that link down below, and let's continue on with the video. Okay, so the first thing that I did in the case of a dopamine detox was to identify compulsive behaviors or actions that I take, and when I take them, I know that they're not really benefiting me in that long term. And so basically the goal here was to focus on that, right? How can I make sure that I'm not making these decisions very short term, like just grabbing my phone right now, going on a TikTok and spending an hour on it? How do I stop myself from doing that? And some people really have difficulty doing this. And you could get into the more serious things beyond social media. I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell you how to deal with those things. But from a social media perspective, some people try abstaining from certain activities for a few hours. Others might try it for a few days. I've seen people do it for 21 days. They say it takes 21 days to form a habit. So I think it's really important to note that dopamine, it drives our wants and our desires, but not necessarily liking or enjoying something. And there's a colossal difference there between those two, that it might tell us, hey, look, we need to go and check our phone right now, or I want to go on Netflix right now. But it doesn't mean that you're going to like that. And so usually you can tell when this is the case that you're being driven by potentially it's of dopamine for decisions when afterwards you feel guilty about it. And that can have a lot to do with it. So what's the big solution here? Does a dopamine detox actually work? And I'll give you a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is no, it doesn't work. But the long answer is in a way, yes. So the short answer here, look, you have to understand that dopamine detoxes, they don't work in a literal manner. Going through some type of isolation or detox, I don't think is going to completely change your life. And it's not, like totally possible to decrease the amount of dopamine that your brain releases. So in a literal form, no, dopamine detox, not really possible. Having said that, I think that the real solution to this problem of not being able to focus or giving into our wants and our desires all the time and then feeling guilty about them afterwards is to acknowledge these situations so that in a way you have two options. You can either override these dopamine temptations, right? You can say, you know what, no, like I'm identifying it, I understand it, and I'm not going to give into that. Or probably the more likely option, if you don't have the discipline, like me, I know I certainly don't have that, you can simply remove the access or make it much more difficult to access these dopamine triggers. Okay, so the key here, there's a couple of different things we can do, but I think really, I don't trust my own discipline to be able to say, no, I'm not going to give in to these short, temptations here. Instead, I decided to take the route of removing a lot of these things that I know I'm not going to be able to say no to. So for example, turning off my phone notifications. I mean, how many people do you know get a notification on their phone and won't go and check out and see what that notification was? Like, we just have to see what it is. That's dopamine speaking right there. And so what I do in this case is obviously turning off phone notifications. I made a full video on phone addiction, so you can go check that out. It's one of my favorite videos that I've ever made. But things like turning your phone into grayscale, all those other ones, you'll hear about that in that video if you go check it out. But I think one of the biggest ones, and this is going to be very controversial, I already know it, but it's from a personal experience that I realized short form content, I didn't feel really happy after watching it. And maybe it's kind of hard to explain, but if you've kind of felt in the same way, then feel free to leave some comments down below on your thoughts of it. But for example, if I would go onto TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels, maybe I'd plan on just being on it for 30 seconds, 1 minute, I click on it. But the thing is, these algorithms know us so well that we can almost never get out of them, and we can just sit on TikTok for hours and hours and hours, or sit on Instagram Reels for hours and hours. And it's something that afterwards I didn't feel very good about. It's like that short term, like, oh, this is like nice, I guess. You don't really think about it. But afterwards, I kind of felt a little bit guilty. And there's a lot of great content, short form. I have a lot of friends who are TikTokers. So I don't want to say that it's necessarily bad. This is almost like a half-baked thought and a half-baked idea, but I'm really starting to wonder if it's actually good for society to just have those rapid fire hits of dopamine in an algorithm that's so intelligent that knows exactly what you want to see. It knows exactly like how to press your buttons, exactly what you want every single time, every single video, so that you never leave the platform. So it's a weird spot. And so my solution to that was to just delete TikTok. I muted a lot of Instagram accounts that have lots of short form content on there, because I know as soon as I click on one, I'm just in it and I can't get out, and it's kind of a problem. And that goes for YouTube as well. Now, obviously, these platforms are pushing us towards this because they want to make more money. Sometimes they'll say things like, something's in the name of mental health, like getting rid of the dislike button, they say, is in the name of mental health. I don't think that's true. I think it's just to keep people on the platform for longer. So it's kind of weird, because I'm also, posting on these platforms. So it's a weird spot to be in. But overall, I would say those are the things that I really focus on. I've just gotten rid of short form content, or I'm trying to avoid it as much as possible. And I feel a lot better. I have no idea if that's the answer. I really don't. But I wanted to share it with you in this video today. All right, so thanks for watching the video. I hope you found some value in it. If you did, make sure you drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see everybody in next week's video. Thanks, Storyblocks, for sponsoring the video. Peace out.